All right. Well, hey, we are going to go ahead and get on started here. Again, my name is Austin Vanetti with Johnson & Wales University Admissions. I'm a culinary demonstrator for Johnson & Wales. So what I do in a normal year is I travel across the states of South Carolina, North Carolina, and all up and down the East Coast, going into different high schools and career centers, doing presentations, somewhat similar to this, but today is going to be a little bit of a specialty presentation, and we're going to be talking a lot about knives. You know, every trade out there has their own tools and their own things that they need to get the job done. Well, a chef's tools are going to be their knives, right? So it's important to learn the proper knives to use for certain things, how to take care of your knives, and to learn about those knife skills. Because one of the first things that you do when you come into a culinary school like Johnson & Wales University is learn your knife cuts. You know, whether you've been working in the industry for 5, 10, 15 years, or you've never had a job in a restaurant before and you come to Johnson & Wales, you're going to start with those knife cuts. So it's definitely something that you all should learn, practice, and it's also good to know a lot about knives as well. It's a pretty fun industry to be in. So we're going to get started with our PowerPoint here, just so we can move along, right? So basically, let's just talk about what makes up a knife and the blade components and the handle components. So I've got an array of knives out here and I want to show you guys some different ones. So I'll start with a knife like this. And you'll also notice, side note here, is that we do have two cameras set up. One kind of has a bird's eye view and then one's kind of closer to here, so that way you guys can see the cutting board. And if you're going to be cutting along with me today, it'll make it a little bit easier for you to follow up here. But we'll start with our basic knife anatomy. So the knife here, you got the blade. Up here, you have the spine of the knife, right? You have the handles right here. And then what you got right here is the tang, right? So the tang goes all the way through, and we'll talk about different knife tangs. There's half tang, full tang, quarter tang. There's all different types, but you know, this is what we're gonna start with here. You also have the rivets that are going along right there too. That's what's gonna hold the knife together. And so they come into, the handles are also different as well. So you'll have like a composite handle like I have right here on this knife, or let's take this knife right here. This is an old school Chicago cutlery knife, and you got a wood handle here. You can also get plastic handle knives, just like this one here. And this knife, we'll talk more about it a little bit later. It's called a Nakiri knife, but it's different from all these other ones because it's not a full tang. So you can kind of see the difference between these two. So you can see where the tang runs through right there, and the tang basically stops right there. So there's pluses and minuses to each one. It really kind of all depends on your personal preference. And that is a big thing with knives, is personal preference. So a lot of these knives that I have here, I use them a lot and I'm very comfortable with them. Now, for other knives, there's certain knives that I just don't like and that don't fit my hand properly. So finding that perfect knife for you is something where you're gonna have to try different knives. You're gonna have to hold different knives, cut different things with them to try to find the one that's most comfortable, because remember that we are gonna be using these for a very, very long time, right? We're gonna be in the kitchen using them 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So you definitely wanna make sure that you are choosing the right knife here. So let's talk a little bit about some different types of knives. So we have traditional different knives like French knife, a boning knife, serrated knives, a slicer, as well as a paring knife. And then you're gonna get into some specialty knives like a santoku, a cleaver knife, a tournay knife, and I'm gonna go back just a little bit to that. My apologies there, because I do wanna kind of showcase some of the different knives. So these knives right here, these are going to be like your classic chef's knife, right? Usually 8-inch chef's knife. They do have longer chef's knives. You can get an 8-inch, 9-inch, even a 6-inch chef's knife. Again, it comes down to personal preference. It comes down to what it is that you're gonna be cutting up. So let's showcase a couple different ones here, right? Let's see, what do we want to talk about next? Let's talk about another specialty knife. This is a santoku knife. And this knife is actually one of my personal favorite knives. I've had this knife for about 12 years or so. This is a Miyabi knife, so it's a Japanese brand, and I'll get into talking about it a little bit later on, but this knife is actually made from Damascus steel. So Damascus steel, if you guys can kind of see in the camera there, I'll kind of move it back and forth, you might see that it has a bunch of little waves that go down it. So each one of those little waves is a layer of Damascus steel. So in this knife alone, I believe there's around 85 layers of steel on here, because Damascus steel with just one layer is not very durable, but when you layer it on and keep pressing it in and layer it on and press it in, it does become very durable and very hard and very rigid, and it's something that will absolutely last a lifetime should you take care of it. Another specialty knife is one that we have right here, and we're actually not even going to call this a cleaver knife. It is very similar to a cleaver knife, but the technical term for this knife is a nakiri knife. So another Asian style knife. It's got that cleaver look to it, but it's a great knife, and this knife has actually recently been one of my personal favorite knives to use. And we'll talk about the cost of knives here a little bit later on, and I'll kind of show you about what these different ones cost. And you got to understand that the most expensive knife, is not going to be essentially the best thing for you. You might also not want to go super cheap. You might want to find a middle ground there, but we'll talk about the different costs of that a little bit later on. We also have a serrated knife right here. So great for slicing up breads or anything that you need a little bit more of that emphasis into. We do have ourselves a boning knife right here as well. Now, one job that I had when I was in college at Johnson & Wales, I worked for a company called Sur La Table. I don't know if you guys have ever been to a Sur La Table before, but it's a really upscale kitchen store. And I used to sell knives there. And one of my favorite knives to do a demonstration with was a flexible boning knife. So this knife is not necessarily a flexible boning knife. The one that I use is actually a global knife, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But what you could essentially do is you could put this knife into the cutting board just like that, and I could take this knife and just bend it to where it completely fold over, let it go, comes right back. And the reason why we want flexibility in boning knives is because we're cutting around bone. Right? When we're fabricating a fish or we're fabricating a side of beef or anything, we want to be able to kind of follow the bone. And if it's a stiff knife, like if you're using a chef's knife to carve that up, it's not going to do the best job. You're going to take more of the bone out. You're not going to get a really pretty fillet or whatever it is that you're cutting out of there. So you definitely want that flexibility. We also do have a paring knife here as well to match our nakiri knife. The paring knife is great for if you are peeling an apple or if you're peeling a potato or something like that. You just kind of want to go over it. It's just a real small knife. Can be used for a lot of different things, smaller cuts. And then we also have our tournay knife here. So a tournay cut is a 7-sided football, right? And if you've ever done a tournay or started to learn about tournays, we probably share the same frustration, right? It's definitely one of the more challenging cuts to do. It's a classical French cut where you take a square of a potato, right? Or something like this, and you just keep going around and going around and going around until you get that nice tournay, which again looks like a 7-sided football. But that is a classic tournay knife right there, and that's a knife that you are going to get in your knife kit if you become a student at Johnson & Wales University. So moving on from that, purchasing knives is definitely a very personal thing, right? So like the slide says here, you do get what you pay for, right? So, I'm a believer in a lot of different knives, and I have some knives at home that I didn't bring in today that costed a lot of money. And knives can go anywhere from $20 for a whole set of knives to over $500, $600 for a single knife. It really just depends on who made the knife, the craftsmanship behind it, the type of steel that they're using or the type of metal, the hardness of the metal, the handle, everything kind of goes into that. I always do steer clear, or I always encourage people to steer clear from buying a block of knives. The reason why is those knives, you are more than likely not going to use every single one of those knives. Chefs typically stick to a few knives. Like you can see kind of the pattern of knives that I have here. A lot of chef's knives. So again, these are going to be the ones that I'm using every single day. Same thing with the Santoku as well. Again, something that we're going to use every day. Even a paring knife is really good. Those are going to kind of be your core things, and a slicer and a boning knife as well. But a whole block of knives might not be something that you need. Granted, it does look really pretty. So you can get some like really pretty wood blocks and they look gorgeous in there. And if that's the aesthetics that you're going for, then hey, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But if you're wanting to get started with just a basic set of knives, I mean, I would just go with the chef's knife. I'd go with a paring knife. I'd go with a boning knife and a serrated knife. So you might not have to spend all that much money on them. So the other thing that you do want to take into consideration is the cost of knives. So let me talk a little bit about the cost of these knives that we have up here, because I feel that it's important for you all to understand that. So I want to start with this knife right here. So this knife is from my personal collection of knives, right? And believe it or not, this knife is not the most expensive thing in the world. I actually ended up getting this knife off of a secondhand website called Nextdoor, right? Where somebody in my neighborhood was selling this thing, and he sold it for $10, right? And this thing is one of the sharpest knives I've ever worked with, and it's incredible. It's German steel, and I absolutely love it. So again, $10. This knife on Amazon, I think, is about $20, right? So again, I like really expensive knives and I like cheap knives. Talking about expensive knives, this Miyabi right here, for this one knife, you're looking at about $100, right? Just for this one. And again, that's talking about the Damascus steel, how stiff the steel is, the ergonomics of the handle, and it's so comfortable for me, and I absolutely love it. I can almost, it just feels like I'm resting my hand when I'm cutting through something, you know? So I ended up spending a little bit more money on this one, which again is totally fine for me. Now, let's talk about this knife right here. So this knife right here, our Nakiri knife, right? This knife actually came in a set from Amazon. My coworker actually purchased this set of knives off of Amazon, and he purchased it to be strictly a demo knife, because when we do our culinary demonstrations, these things get beat up. When we're throwing these knives in and out of coolers, traveling all across the East Coast, going into high schools, they get beat up really fast. So we wanted something that we could demo with and not have to worry about it getting beat up. And this Nakiri knife is definitely it. So this whole set of knives that we have with this ended up costing around $20. So again, pretty cheap, but something that we want to think about when we're beating it all up, you know, and taking it all over the place. We want to make sure that it's we don't mind tearing it up. But you can also get into something like a Bob Kramer knife. So I do have a Bob Kramer knife at home, and I did not bring it in today because that knife is one of the most special things in the world to me. But this Bob Kramer is really famous for being a bladesmith, but also he's one of the most famous kitchen cutlery bladesmiths out there. And some of his knives will start around the $300 range, and then some of his knives will go over $1,000 for one single knife. But he's a craftsman with that, and it's really, really cool. So Kramer is also connected with Zwilling. So Zwilling is another German knife company, and so they've kind of linked up together. So you can get stuff like that. You can also get into the German steel with Henkel and the Henkel twins. So another thing that you'll notice with knives, and I don't have any Henkel knives up here with me, but if you know it's a real Henkel, you'll see that there's a twin on there, right? And a twin is two little figurines. Now, the other Henkels that you'll see will only have one figurine on there, and that's not a true Henkel knife, right? But when you see the Henkel twins, that's a real Henkel knife. And you'll also notice the price of the twins goes up drastically. So definitely something to think about there. Another cool set of knives that a lot of people really enjoy are global knives. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, I do not like global knives whatsoever. The reason why is global knives are thinner knives. Not saying that the steel is bad or anything, but they're a lot thinner and they don't fit my hand well. But I will tell you, there is a cool thing about global knives. And a lot of global knives, inside of their handle is filled with sand, right? So you could take a global knife and you could shake it like that and you will hear sand going in there. And the reason why they do that is it balances really well. So this one is not quite as balanced as I would like it, but you could take a global knife and just balance it right on your fingertip, right? And it'll stay perfectly. right? And they're really cool. And again, that flexible boning knife through Global is incredible. But again, this is down to what you like and how it fits your hand and how you're going to be using it. Another good example of a good quality knife is Wüsthof. Again, another German knife company, really, really great quality. So it's really up to you as to what kind of knife that you're like and that price point that you're at. You know, you can go to a place like Sur La Table or any other kitchen store and try out different knives, you know. So I would let all my customers when I work there, I'd let them hold a, you know, an $800 chef's knife. And then I'd let them hold a $50 chef's knife and see what they think, you know? So you're gonna kind of figure out which fits you the best from your budget and the comfort as well. So moving on from that, and also don't forget those kitchen shears, very important. Let's talk a little bit about knife maintenance. So it's important to remember to keep your knives sharp, right? A sharp knife is incredibly important for you, right? Sharp knives are a lot better if you were to have an accident and cut yourself. Believe it or not, it's a lot better to get cut by a sharp knife versus a dull knife, because a dull knife is actually going to tear the skin versus a sharp knife will make a quick cut. It's not too bad, right? Unless you cut yourself really bad. But you do want to make sure that you're taking care of your knives. So one thing that is a golden rule when it comes to keeping knives sharp is never run knives through the dishwasher, right? It drives me insane when I see students or even other friends that'll just throw these chef's knives into a dishwasher. Never do that. That will ruin the handle. It can actually cause your rivets right here to pop out as well. It gets water inside of them. It can cause the blade to rust. It's really, really not good. So with your knives, you always want to make sure that after you use them, you're just giving them a quick wipe down, or just make sure you scrub them, just hand wash them, and make sure that they're dry. So always make sure that you're taking proper care of your knives. Another thing that you'll do with your knife all the time is hone it, right? So this is a honing steel right here. A lot of people think that this is a knife sharpener. This is in fact not a sharpener. What this does, this actually straightens out the blade of your knife. So you could take a knife and you can hone your knives in several different ways. I've had chef instructors that teach me to hold the knife like this on a wet towel, and we can pick ourselves a knife, right? And you just kind of go down just like that from the very back all the way to the front, right? Or you can hold it like this, but what you really want to do is make sure that you're using the steel to go out, right? So I'm keeping this hand steady and I'm using the steel to go like that. And the reason why is it's just a lot safer, right? Versus, granted, I do know what I'm doing. If you don't know what you're doing, all right, you can be cutting into yourself like that, and that could be bad if you're not paying attention. So it's much easier to actually move the steel just like so. Or put it like that on a wet towel. And the reason why we want that wet towel there is because this can go all over the place, and again, not going to be nice. We can also get more in depth with knife sharpening. I'll move this piece of equipment over here. This piece of equipment is called a tri-stone, right? And because we have 3 different types of stone on here. We have a fine, a medium, and a coarse ground. You always want to make sure that you're using the fine for sharpening a knife, right? And this is how you get a really, really good sharpen on here, right? So what you want to do if you have a tri-stone, you'll notice that it's either oil or water-based. If it's oil-based, do not put water on it. Okay, kind of self-explanatory, but the reason why is if you put water on it, it can actually crack that stone. So we got a little bit of honing oil right here, and I'll just give you just a quick little demonstration on how that we sharpen our knives on this tri-stone. So I'll put a little bit of oil on there, right? I'll just kind of rub that oil right in, right? Then what we'll do is we will take our knife, and similar to how we did it with the honing steel, we're gonna kind of go from the back of the knife all the way there. So basically you want to start up here in the corner and you want to end at that corner right there. So one fluid motion, okay? Then we can take the knife on the other side, same exact way. And again, this is going to get a razor sharp edge. Now, I also want to talk about taking care of specialty knives. So let's talk about our Miyabi right here. With our Miyabi knife, I am not going to sharpen it on this stone. And the reason why is that in order to sharpen one of these Japanese style knives, you're going to need about I think it's like an 18 to 20 degree angle. So it has to be very specific. They actually sell knife sharpeners that are specific to Asian style knives. So it keeps that blade, which the bevel is right on the blade there. You'll have double bevel or single bevel. Most of them are double bevel. That's kind of fun to say. But the double bevel will just come into a point right there. And you want to keep that again at an 18 to 20 degree angle. So I'm not going to run it on that. But versus a chef's knife like this, right? That's no problem at all, right? So again, going from the very end all the way to there. And you want to do it equal amounts on each side. So that way you have an even blade, right? So there's a little bit about knife sharpening there. And then after we are done with sharpening it, the key thing to do is to grab your honing steel and just hone the knife, right? So we'll go ahead and just go up and down, just like so. And then the fun part of doing this is testing out the knife to see if it is actually sharp. So let's test it out, see if it's actually sharp, right? We'll start with a potato right here, right? Very sharp, right? Perfect. That's what we want to see, right? So we got the knife sharpening right there. Again, I'm going to go ahead and give this a quick wipe off. We're going to go ahead and set this guy over here. All right. And so we talked about the honing steel, we talked about the sharpening stone, and the stone is going to be the most popular one out there, and that's what most chefs are using to sharpen their knives. There are also some electric sharpeners out there too. One of the other places that I worked at was a meal prep company, kind of like the Dinner Affair, or excuse me, not Dinner Affair, that's the place that I worked at. It's kind of like Blue Apron or Hello Fresh. Where we used a lot of these boning knives because we were cutting up a lot of meat. And so we actually had an electric sharpener there. And for a boning knife like this is not a very expensive boning knife. And it's mainly used for utility purposes, right? To get through stuff. So we would run this through that electric one and get it sharp. And then we'd also have our honing steels even attached to our belts. So if you ever see a butcher with one of these, right, he'll grab the honing steel and he'll do a couple slices like that. All right, moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about knife safety and handling. Because knife safety is ultra important. It's really, really important for you guys to talk about knife safety and think about it. I know for any students that might be watching this, you might think that knife safety is not the most fun thing to learn about, but I can tell you that I've cut my hands a lot, right? I know a lot of people that have cut their hands. I've seen some seriously bad injuries happen because of improper use of knives. So it's important to make sure that we're talking about knife safety. So a couple things that I want to bring up when we're talking about knife safety, and we'll kind of go into this a little bit once we start fabricating up all of our veggies over here that we're going to do our knife skills with. But one of the main things that you're going to learn is about doing the bear claw method, right? So we always say, if you do the claw, you protect your paw. So what you do is you curl your fingers over and you tuck your thumb back just like that. So that way, whenever I'm cutting through something, all right, let's say we're going to cut through this potato, right? I'm not worried about my fingers being in the way. Versus all times too many, I'll see people that'll be holding on to something like this with their knives, and that's just a recipe for disaster, right? So you want to make sure that you're being ultra careful by remembering to curl those fingers over and tuck the thumb back. Also, how you hold your knife is very important as well. So you'll notice that whenever I'm holding a knife, I'm really not holding the knife by the handle like this, right? I'm not cutting through something like that. That does a couple things for you, right? One thing that it does is it automatically puts your elbow out, and it's an uncomfortable position. You look kind of funny when you're doing it, so people might make jokes at you, right? And you don't want that to happen either, right? So you want to grip up on your knives a little bit. So when you grab the knife, I call it the pinch grip. You pinch the bolster of the knife, which is the strongest point of the knife right here. You pinch that bolster, the other three fingers wrap around the knife, and now what happens with my elbow? It stays tucked to my side, It's relaxed, right? And so that way we have a more relaxed motion there, right? We're able to use that rocking motion to cut through here, but we're also not going to be slipping around. So if you can see when I actually hold a knife by the handle like this, and I'm going to cut something up, right? It's not very stable, right? Versus if I pinch up on that grip, wrap the other 3 fingers around there, it's very stable. So if I need to cut something up over here, right, I'm not wobbling all over the place. So always remember to pinch up a little bit on the blade of that knife. Again, use that pinch grip and never try to catch a falling knife. That is a little bit self-explanatory as well, but you know, sometimes like at my house, I have a big magnetic strip on my wall where I keep all my knives at, right? And if a knife were to ever fall there, I'm going to grab it. You never want to try to reach out and grab a knife because more than likely you're going to grab the knife at the wrong way and that's going to be a trip to the hospital, right? So if you see a knife start to fall, all you do is just stand there, right? Just let it fall, okay? Don't try to move around and catch it or anything like that. It'll be really bad. So always make sure that you're watching that and don't ever try to catch that falling knife. So let's see. And then another thing to think about is choosing the right knife for the task at hand. So if I'm going to peel said potato here, I'm more than likely not going to grab a chef's knife to do that with, right? Because that's a huge knife, right? And that's not going to end well for me. What I'm going to use to peel that potato is a little paring knife, right? So that way I can hold it right here, right? We can just take our peels off just like so, right? Nothing to it. Same thing if you're doing that with an apple or whatever. You know, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right knife. We're not using a boning knife to cut through that or anything, you know? Again, I'm also not using a chef's knife to fillet fish, right? Or I'm not using a paring knife to fillet fish. So remembering the proper knife usage is definitely very, very important for you all. And then we talked about the keeping the fingers out of the way, the bear claw, and then also the slip-resistant cutting board. So that's exactly what this one is today. This is a slip-resistant cutting board. It's got these little grips right here. So I do not have to put a wet paper towel down there, but normally what we would do if we didn't have a slip-resistant cutting board is you want to just grab yourself a wet paper towel, wring it out, right? And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of fold it up, right? And then we'll just put that right under the cutting board. So that way our cutting board is not sliding around anywhere. It stays sturdy because you don't want the cutting board moving around. If we're cutting up this potato and it slides out, that's not something that you want. So make sure that your cutting board is secured, right? Whether it be through the grips, if you have those, or a wet paper towel or a wet rag. Either way, that will always do good. And then we already talked about cleaning your knives, and we never want to leave a knife in a sink. So that was actually an injury that I had. When I was in high school, I was working at a little cafe, and somebody decided to leave a chef's knife in the soapy water, and I reached in and I grabbed it, and I did get cut, right? It was really bad. The water turned red. I wondered what in the world happened. Pulled my hand out. I'm bleeding, right? So as soon as you go to clean a knife, always make sure, give it a good scrub down, wash, rinse it, sanitize, get it out of there, right? Get it out of the water, because when you're working in a fast-paced environment or in a fast-paced restaurant, you know, you might not be looking. You might just be running dishes through, and you got a timeline, right? You got to get stuff done, and you might not see that knife in there. You reach in, you grab it, and there your timeline shot. You're on your way to the hospital. So make sure that you get those knives out of that soapy water, and so you avoid any accidents, right? So again, going back into knife safety and handling, we always want to talk about safety. So just like we've been talking about it, but always remember to securely hold your knife and anchor that cutting board. Keep your fingertips curled back, eyes on the knife. Focus on what you're doing, all right? Don't be distracted by what else is going on, right? Make sure that you're looking exactly at what you're doing and focus on that task so you don't get distracted and end up cutting your hands. And take your time, and don't try to catch those falling knives, right? The other thing I do want to talk about with that is take your time. Especially if you're a high school student watching this and you're just learning knife cuts. Listen, you do not have to fly through all of your knife cuts. That's not the goal when you're learning about knife cuts. The goal is for you to take your time, watch what you're doing, right? And just be careful because, those accidents do happen. And when you're not paying attention and trying to go too fast, that's when those accidents happen. So make sure that you just take your time, go through it step by step by step, right? Until you get those knife cuts down pat. And then once you get them kind of down pat, then you might get to working a little bit faster. But again, still be careful. So all right, let's talk another key ingredient to doing knife cuts and getting everything ready, and that's mise en place. So mise en place is a word that all of you students should be very familiar with. Mise en place is a French word that means everything in its place and a place for everything. So before we start our knife skills demonstration, I've actually got everything that I need set up right here and ready to go. So all the stuff, I use my little demo potato here from just some of the stuff that we've been doing. We've got our other potatoes we're gonna cut up. We've got our bell pepper, our mango, we got our onion, we got everything set up and ready to go. I have all my other knives laid out. So for this demonstration purpose, so mise en place is extremely important when you are getting ready to start your knife cuts. Another thing to think about is when you're just learning about knife cuts, start with potatoes and carrots, right? So grab yourself a 5-pound bag, a 50-pound bag, a 100-pound bag, whatever bag of potatoes that you want, and start working on your knife cuts, right? Potatoes are very forgiving with knife cuts. They're easy to see, and it's the best thing to learn on. Also, who doesn't like mashed potatoes? Right? So that's what we always used to do, was we would practice our knife cuts. We'd throw it all into boiling water. We'd let that soften up, mash it all up, make ourselves mashed potatoes afterwards. So it's great to be able to reuse those. Same thing with carrots as well. Carrots, again, are very forgiving. You do want to be kind of selective about the carrots that you're working with, though. I've got a larger carrot right here. If you're working with some of the thinner ones, that can be a little bit more challenging. But potatoes are my go-to, as well as carrots and onions as well. Onions and garlic, those are always another good thing to do. So all right, and then don't forget to practice. I mean, that's the number one thing that we want our students to do, is to practice those knife cuts. Just like a NFL football player didn't get to the NFL by just sitting on the couch and, playing Madden all day long, right? They didn't do that. They were on the field practicing every single day. Same thing with world-renowned chefs. Their knife skills are really, really good because they do them every single day. They study knife cuts. They watch other people, how they do knife cuts, and they're cutting through all types of stuff every day to hone those knife skills. So it's important to practice it. Practice it a couple times a week. Maybe over the weekend, you practice on some potatoes or carrots or whatever it is that you want to cut up to utilize for dinner. So make sure that you practice all the time and keep those skills sharp. Definitely very, very important. So these are going to be kind of an example of our standard knife cuts. Now, we do also know that knife cuts do evolve, right? In the restaurant industry, back in the day, in the early days of restaurants, knife cuts looked a little bit different than they do now. They're named a little bit different. The sizes can be different. So they're evolving. But the standard knife cuts now, you're going to have your large dice, your medium dice, your small dice, your bâtonnet, your brunoise, your julienne, rondelle, diagonal, mince, and a chiffonade. And we're going to demonstrate some of those for you all today, but I do have a few cut up already that I can kind of show you. So if you're looking at like a small dice right here, this would be kind of your small dice, right? And then even onto a large dice, which is what these are going to look like, onto your bâtonnet, right? They're going to look like this, right? Onto a julienne from the carrot. Going to look like this as well. So nice and thin, right? So we're going to go through all those here momentarily, and I'll show you guys some different ones, but that's kind of the standard ones. So before we get started with our demonstration here today, I do want to see if there are any questions. If you guys do have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and throw those into the chat. Or if you want to unmute yourself and ask those questions, definitely would love that. If you have questions about specific knives, or if you need any advice on any knife purchasing or how to handle your knives, anything like that, I definitely would love to answer those for you. So feel free to do that. But I think that we're going to go ahead and get started with a little knife skills demonstration, right?
Jeff, we had a question from Clayton. What is your favorite knife?
So my favorite knife that I have, that I don't use is a Bob Kramer chef's knife. The reason why I don't use it is because it is beautiful. It's got an ebony wood handle on it. It is just a gorgeous knife, and I'm really too scared to beat it up. And that's just not what I want. But my personal favorite knife right now is always going to be just a chef's knife, right? I love this chef's knife here, but also another one of my favorites, and you're seeing a trend here, right? I have a lot of different favorite knives, but my other most recent favorite knife is this Nakiri knife. So this Nakiri knife is just incredible. Even though it's a relatively cheap set of knives, this is a absolute razor, and I just love the way that this Nakiri knife can just rock through things. It's really a jack of all trades. So I didn't really have that much experience working with Nakiri knives until my coworker had actually purchased this one. But this is rapidly becoming one of my favorites, and I'm already eyeballing a couple really good Nakiri knives. So I just have to get out and try some of those and hold them and see how they fit. But I've got a lot of favorite ones, but this Nakiri knife is my personal favorite right now, and that's the one that I'm going to use throughout this demonstration. So great question. I appreciate that. Any other questions? No? Okay, perfect. Well, hey, let's go ahead and get started with some knife cuts here. Why don't we? Let's start easy, all right? Let's start with dicing up an onion. If you're cutting along with me today, if you're a class watching this, you're cutting along, go ahead and take your onion and just cut it in half, just like so, right? Make sure you take the peel off of there. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the lines on this onion as our guides or our markers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife, and down these little lines, I'm just going to make a slice going just like so. All right. After that is done, you're going to notice that we left this little piece attached. That way it holds everything together, okay? We don't want to cut all the way through it, otherwise it'll all fall apart. Then what we're going to do is we're going to turn this knife, or turn the onion over to where the lines are now going straight across. I'll take my knife on the flat side, just like so, and we're just going to put a couple slices going horizontally. Last step, all we have to do is we're just going to take our knife and we're just going to cut down the onion just like so. And you're going to see what happens is it just falls into a bunch of tiny little squares. So there is a dice of an onion, all right? Simple and easy. So let's grab ourselves a little container to put these in. Make sure we're working clean. Also, you might have noticed that little end piece of the onion. I did go ahead and put that into my compost bucket. So here at Johnson & Wales University, we are really big into composting. So all of our vegetable scraps that we use are going to go into a compost pile. We actually have our own urban garden here called the Coop, where we grow a lot of our own fresh vegetables and herbs at. So we compost anything from vegetable scraps to paper towels to coffee grounds. Anything that's biodegradable, we're always going to reuse those. And that's something important when you're remembering those knife cuts. So let's move on to a potato here, right? So we got ourselves a nice potato. Let's see, what kind of cut are we going to do on this? I think we're going to do like your traditional French fry cut, okay? So a little bâtonnet and then maybe a little bit of julienne as well. So what I want to do is I just want to take the sides down here. I'm not taking much off the sides, but we need a surface to where it's not going to roll around, right? So I'm going to start taking off these sides here. All right. We're just going to keep moving it around. Every piece I take off of there is going straight into composting, going straight into our garden, right? There we go. And keep kind of trimming it up just a little bit. We will use that piece. Right? Take this piece off of there. We'll use that as well. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take these little end pieces off right here. All right, be good. And then we're going to start cutting down this potato here, right? So we said we're going to do a bâtonnet, right? So we'll go ahead and get that right there, that right there, that right there. Then we can take our potatoes that we've cut on those slices and just cut down them just like so. All right, so we'll get a nice bâtonnet out of there, all right? Good. Put those in the bâtonnet pile. With the bâtonnet, now what we're going to do is we're going to take them a little bit thinner, right? We're going to make that a julienne, right? So I'm going to take one piece at a time here, right? We're just going to slice down them just like so. We're going to get ourselves a julienne here. And you can leave these little end pieces on here, and I'll show you guys what I mean to make it look more like a home fry or something like that. All right, so I'll show you guys that right here. So we can take our knife We just cut down it, and you got more of a home-style French fry look there, right? So we could pop those into the deep fryer, and you got your own French fries, all right? Real good. After that, let's see here. We can kind of square this guy up just a little bit more, all right? And then what we'll do is kind of a medium dice here, all right? So I'll take this half just like so, right? And we'll just kind of make these nice little squares, right? Perfect. So you got some squares there with your medium dice. All right, excellent. Now let's see here, what else? Let's go with a carrot here, all right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do kind of the same thing as we would with a potato. So I'll kind of get myself a flat surface to work with. We're just gonna cut down that, just like so. All right, a little bit more. Perfect. All right, it's nice and good to me. So what I'm gonna do next, I'm gonna make a little brunoise here, all right? So we're gonna take our carrot, we're gonna cut down it just like so. All right, fantastic. Then what we'll do is we'll kind of gather these together. All right. We'll cut them in half. All right. We'll gather them back together. We'll just cut through them just like this. All right. Again, remembering to keep those fingers curled over and those thumbs tucked back, utilizing that pinch grip. And there, we got a nice, real small cut, just like that, nice and easy. All right, nothing too complicated. I think all of you students are definitely capable of doing these cuts. All right. And then with this one, we'll cut this guy in half again, finish him off with a little brunoise as well. All right. And then I'll show you guys what we call a roll cut, all right, with a carrot. So I'll go ahead and grab myself another carrot here. All right. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip the carrot. I'm actually going to use a parsnip for this, all right, because I got the parsnip right here. Carrots are over there, right? Make it easier. So do a roll cut here, right? I'm going to kind of square off the end. Then what I'm going to do is at an angle, I'm just going to cut it. Then we're going to roll it. We're going to cut it again. We're going to roll it. We're going to cut it again. We're going to roll it. Cut it again. Just like this, right? So you got your, we call it a roll cut or an oblique cut. All right. Perfect. Go ahead and set those right over here as well. Moving on from that, let's see, what else do we got to cut up here, right? Let's cut up a bell pepper here, right? So to fabricate up a bell pepper, what I'll do is I'll just kind of take the top off, just like so. That could be usable product or into compost. Then what I'll do is I'll just kind of take the sides of the pepper down, just like so. Kind of working away from the core of that pepper and also getting away from the pith of the pepper. So the pith of the pepper is just kind of that white membrane that's right in there. We definitely want to get away from that, all right? We want to cut that part out, right? So we have a nice flat surface to work on here. And with this pepper, I think we'll go ahead and just give that a nice, real small dice, right? And then after that, we'll go ahead and work on a mince, right? And a mince is one of the smallest cuts to make, and it's nice and easy. All right, so after we have some of the pepper all cut up here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my knife, right? I'm gonna cut down the pepper just like so. And this is actually making a julienne of a pepper, right? So those long, thin, little matchstick size cuts, right? That's a julienne of a pepper right there. And then what we'll do is we'll just kind of gather them together. We will take our knife and we're just going to cut down those juliennes just like so. All right, perfect. And there you go. You got a nice small dice there. All right, excellent. Let's grab another container to put these in. So I'm just kind of running through just a bunch of different knife cuts for you so that way you all can see an example of not only things that you can cut up, but also how you practice with these things as well. Set these off to the side. Now let's see. Let's actually do a chiffonade. So a chiffonade, we were going to do this with basil, but we actually did not have any basil. So we're actually going to chiffonade with some red cabbage here. So chiffonade, what you want to do is you want to take whatever it is that you are cutting up, like basil or any type of leafy green, and we're just going to kind of fold it up, right? Or roll it together, just like so. You want to make sure you hold it together, and then you just take your knife and you cut through this. And chiffonade kind of translates into little ribbons, right? So kind of like a ribbon cut. So if you want an example of something that's chiffonaded, like with this, this would be like a slaw mix, right? So that's a nice chiffonade right there. And again, we do that with basil, with all different types of leafy greens, and it's really good for presentation and looks nice. So, all right, we'll grab up our chiffonade here. Now, let's see, why don't we work with our pineapple? We'll get kind of crazy here. We'll go ahead and start cutting up the pineapple. So I'll show you guys that. Another fun one to demonstrate with. If you like fruit, right, I absolutely love pineapple. So to cut up a pineapple, what I always do is I start by taking the top off, just like so, right? And then what we will do is I'll also take off this bottom piece right here, right? So that way we have a pretty square surface to work on. Then what I'll do is I'll start by kind of taking the skin off, just like so. So you just want to take your knife and just kind of follow down that skin. All right. And then what we'll do, since we don't have a pineapple core, we'll just kind of cut it into quarters. Right? And then we'll make our little pineapple wedges there. When you're taking skin off of any type of vegetable or fruit like this, you do want to make sure that you're not taking off too much of the actual meat of it, if you will, all right? You don't want to take too much of the product. You know, we want to take a very, very thin amount off of the skin of the pineapple, right? Because again, this is our usable product. And if we're working in a restaurant, you know, this pineapple costed us money, and we want to make sure that we're getting the most out of this pineapple. And if we're taking all of that off of there, our yield is going to be a lot less than what it should be. So once we have that done, what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and cut down the pineapple just like so. We'll just cut around that core. All right, perfect. You got the core right here. Not very good to eat. Doesn't taste too good. All right. Then you got your pineapple right here. Got some larger pieces here. So what I'm going to do is I'm even going to cut those a little bit more. All right. Those like this. Beautiful. And then all we have to do is just cut through the pineapple just like that. And you got pineapple chunks, right? Easy as that. Use that for a recipe. In summertime, you get a nice hot summer day. Like perfect to grab a few of those. And again, these are just great things to practice with, right? Oop. That piece of pineapple is trying to get away from us. Not today. All right, there we go. So we got our pineapple all cut up. Simple and easy. Let's go ahead and scoop up this pineapple here. We'll save this for later. We'll use that in a recipe that we're going to be doing. And then let's see, we can cut up some more potatoes as well. We can go ahead and start working on some more of those. Our way. And always remember to clean as you go. So as you are cutting up certain things, always make sure that you go ahead and get it out of the way, right? Go ahead, give your cutting board a wipe down, give your knife a wipe down, right? Make sure that you are working clean. So while I'm getting ready to go ahead and cut up these other potatoes here, I will check back in and see if there were any more questions. If anybody had any questions come in, did anything come in?
We're having some audio issues, but I think it might be with the camera itself because everything looks good in Zoom. But I did assure them that we will have audio for the recording if we're not able to correct it.
Okay. Let me check my audio here. Let's see here. Check my audio. Make sure everything's good. So microphone, set that. Let's see if that's any better. If you still can't hear me too well, let us know. But go ahead, type in the chat. I just adjusted something real quick. Let me know if you can hear a little bit better there. And if not, we'll adjust it. And like Chef Henry said,
good to go.
Good to go? All right, perfect. So that's one thing that we've been learning a lot about with these virtuals, is that, you know, audio issues do come up often, but I think we've got it kind of narrowed down as to how to fix that. All right. So go ahead and do some of this right here. Now let's do a larger dice here. All right. These down, like that. Boom. And there's a nice little large dice right there for us as well. Easy as that, right? Another fun thing to do. Let's see. What can we work with now? Let's work with a little mango here, right? So a mango has a core that runs straight down this. So when you look at a mango, you know, you don't want to cut it this way. You always want to make sure you cut it this way. And you're really just going to kind of cut around the core of that mango, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a piece off just like that. I'm going to take another piece off just like that. All right, perfect. We'll set this guy off to the side. And then what we'll do, this is an example of using a different knife, right? So to cut up a mango, I always like to make the slices like you would if you're dicing up an avocado. Cut it inside the skin there. I don't want to use an 8-inch chef's knife to make these little cuts, right? We're going to use a smaller knife here, so just our little paring knife. And we'll just make some slices, nice and even slices. That goes straight down our mango here, right? Then what we'll do, go this way, right? Perfect. And then all you gotta do is just flip that mango inside out, just like that. Then you can scoop off those little pieces, right? So I'll do the other side here. And again, these are great examples of ways that you can practice your knife skills. Just make sure you're not scared. Just go ahead, get in there, start practicing. You know, your knife skills won't be the best when you first start out. And granted, mine probably aren't the best right now, right? But, you know, it takes a lot of practice, it takes a lot of time, and it's also a lot of fun, too, doing those knife cuts. But again, if you're wanting to go into culinary, this is one of the things that you are absolutely going to start with. So it's definitely important to be pretty well-versed with your knife cut, So with that being said, folks, it looks like we are getting down to the last couple minutes of our presentation here, and we've cut up a lot of different things. We've done knife cuts from our julienne to our bâtonnet to our small dice, large dice. We've done a lot of different things, fabricated a pineapple, a mango. I hope that you all have been able to take away something from this presentation. Students, I hope that you enjoyed this and maybe you cut along with me as well. If you do have any other questions or anything, don't hesitate to reach back out to us. Let us know if there's anything that we can do for you, or if there's any other type of skills that you would like to see, maybe in a future demonstration. Make sure that you let us know, and we'd love to be able to do that for you. But I do want to say thank you on behalf of myself, Austin Vanetti, and on behalf of Johnson & Wales University. Thank you all very, very much for attending our presentation today. It was a pleasure to speak with you all, and I look forward to working with you all in the future. So that being said, I wish you all a great day, and I hope you have a great weekend. Thank you so much.